think we're live on YouTube, live on LinkedIn, and Twitter will do its thing any second now. Hi, everyone. Welcome to the end of another week. Happy Friday. I hope that you've all had a great week. A little bit of democracy in the UK, a little bit of independence in the US. I think everyone's having a fun week, I hope. And I have had a really busy week, but I'm excited to end the week chatting about a little bit of the intersection of organic search and paid search. And we're going to dive a little bit into some of the new clickstream data that Rand has published on SparkToro, which I've found really interesting. Has been very thought-provoking for me, and I've been bouncing around in my head since he published it. And I've got a little bit of my kind of thoughts to layer onto that. Before we get into that, many of you probably know my name is Will Critchlow. I'm founder and CEO at SearchPilot. And what we do at SearchPilot is we help really big websites test what works for SEO. So our customers are folks in typically e-commerce, travel, retail, real estate, jobs, local listings, those kinds of things. And they're sites like Skyscanner, like Marks and Spencer, like Petco. And what we're really trying to do is turn organic search into the channel that all of the leadership always wished it could be. A little bit more accountable, a bit more measurable, higher performing. And answering that question, well, if you want to do better, what should you do more of? Where should you put your budget? What should you spend more money on? Which I think every SEO team ought to be able to answer, but is a surprisingly hard question to answer for many teams. So that's what we do. If you're at all interested in what we do, you can get more information at searchpilot.com/live, where there are some customer stories, some more information about how SEO testing works, links to SEO test results to learn from and sign up to receive in your email, as well as a demo form. So get a meeting booking form if you're interested in speaking to someone and seeing how our stuff actually does its thing. Then we would obviously love to speak to you. But yeah, this idea of making the channel, the organic search channel, more accountable, more measurable, higher performing, and ultimately more like a paid channel ties obviously very neatly into what I want to talk about today. And without going too far down the crazy rabbit hole, I've always been interested in paid search, just never really built a business around it. Still used to do some paid search marketing, but it never became as big for us as SEO. And I always wondered about the opportunities there, but I'm just fascinated by from a kind of academic perspective. I actually studied auction theory at university at the end of my time at university, and that is a massive geek out thing that if you're interested, my DMs are open. Always up for chatting auction theory. And the AdWords auctions are the largest parallel auction in the world, I imagine right now, and just an unbelievable business model. And that also ties in a little bit to what I wanted to talk about today. So I'm going to pull up a screen share and let me just get that. Here we go. So I should say, incidentally, all of this is coming from, actually, let me share. So Rand wrote this post earlier in the week. He's framed this very much around the zero-click side of things, and that is really interesting. He's covered that angle. I'm not going to rehash the zero-click side or the EU versus US side. I've just focused on the US. They're not radically different. They're interestingly different. If you're interested in the regulation, in the way that the EU is dealing with this self-preferencing behavior, alleged self-preference, I don't know, whatever it is, and the AI overviews and those kinds of things. But I am, for the purposes of what I want to talk about today, much more interested in this information about what happens when folks perform a search. And so I'm going to drill a little deeper into that. So I'd highly recommend you read this post. Rand has embedded this video at the end as well that explains some of the things that I'm going to be talking about here today. And we can dig in at the end about some slight differences in perspective. But broadly speaking, what this ultimately shows is that Google is in no risk of losing market share, total searches, or searches per searcher, as Rand points out. On all of these metrics, they're stronger than ever. So this fits with, I'm actually wearing my Brighton SEO Search Engine Optimist t-shirt. Thank you, Kelvin and team. This is the perfect t-shirt for me because, as you know, I'm into SEO and I am an optimist. But yeah, well, let's dive into this. So this is Rand's presentation of the key bit of data. As I said, this is focusing specifically on what happens when Americans perform a search. The EU is not radically different, and I don't know whether the UK is bundled into the EU or separate or whatever, but I don't expect it to be particularly different in the UK either. So, on average, or in aggregate, when folks perform a search, there's these ones that Rand calls zero-click searches. So, folks who do nothing, this browsing session ends after the search, and some folks who do another search. Specifically in Google's All tab, which is another regular search. In other words, they don't refine it to a map search or an image search or a news search or those kinds of things. Those would be counted in this bit down here because there's other things that can result, which is a click. So it can be a click out to an organic result, a click out to a Google property, whether that's a separate Google property like YouTube, or whether it's a refined search like images, news, or so forth, or it can be a click to a paid ad. So this was the data that Rand showed. And this was the thumbnail that I put up for this video, and I kind of struggle with the need to do these thumbnail videos for YouTube and live streams, so I'm slightly embarrassing myself. But anyways, well, actually, let's move on a bit. But this, I've just broken the same data down into a simple stacked bar chart. So what we can see here is folks who do nothing is the purple. So this is what I'm calling true zero click. So they definitely got what they wanted, or not, but either way, they've stopped. They're not searching anymore. Folks who perform another search, as Rand points out, this could be a completely unrelated new search. This almost might be like they're doing nothing. They just happen to have done a new unrelated search. Or it could be that they do a search refinement. The light orange I've got here is clicks to Google properties, green to organic, and you can barely see it, but dark orange is the paid ads. And the unbelievable thing is that this little sliver right here, this little sliver of searches, of clicks rather, this is responsible for 76% of all of Google's revenue. So that's almost $250 billion a year. This is what I mean when I talk about Google having possibly the best product market fit and the best business model in history. Just unbelievable revenue and scale. And the rest of this is other forms of ads, non-search ads, in other words, and all the other things they do. Workspace, Google Cloud Platform, probably forgetting something major, but those things. So yeah. Side note, isn't it wild that all of Google's revenue, or 3/4 of it, $250 billion a year, is in this tiny sliver. And you think about every paid search agency in the world, every single paid search agency in the world, all of their revenue added together is a fraction of that line. They're charging whatever they charge. Small ones, maybe 10%. Some of them, those numbers are larger, 12%, 15% of ad spend. And it's like a tenth, or somewhere between a fifth and a tenth of that line, spread out between tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of agencies. It's mind blowing, absolutely mind blowing, the scale of this stuff, and it's really, really hard to get your head around $250 billion. But I wanted to drill into this a little bit deeper. So, as I say, this is of all initial search sessions. So you start a session, do a search. What happens next? You either do nothing and the session ends. You do another search, click on a Google property, click on an organic search result, click on a paid ad. Okay, that's what happens. Rand has included the pink, the another search, into zero click, which I think is uh, I slightly disagree with. We just don't have better data on it. It's true, obviously, some of them are zero click, some of them are the session ended, and really a new search session has begun. It's just that we can't tease that out of the data. But of course, what happens sometimes is you do another search that's in the same session, and it's actually a search refinement. And of that search, some of them are then satisfied, zero click. Some of them are clicks to a Google property, but some of them are going to be clicks out to organic, or obviously to a paid ad. And some of them go to yet another search, and there's a kind of recursive element to it. So I'm not trying to break into that analysis. We just don't have the data. I think let's just, for the sake of this argument, think about those initial search sessions, and the if we just look at percentage of all the clicks rather than a percentage of all searches, that breaks down somewhat differently. And organic is now it takes basically 71% of those clicks, where a good chunk goes to Google properties and a small chunk goes to paid ads. But you can obviously break that down even further and think, well, okay, an awful lot of searches have no ads on them. And this is, in my opinion, the ones with no ads on them is where the AI overviews come to play. It's where the one boxes come to play. It's where all the ways that, these are the searches where Google just wants to get you the answer as quickly as possible. Whereas the commercial searches with the ads on them, those are the ones that Google really wants to monetize. And they've done a really good job at that. We've seen it's almost like the Gillette or, the razor commercials of, does anyone remember when they first went to 3 blades? And now what are they at? The 5 blades, 6 blades, 7 blades, 10 blades. And, the Google ad pack is a little bit like that, with the added mystique of trying to make more of them fall into essentially blend them in better, which I still would love to see someone do the longitudinal study over time of showing folks Google search results and getting them to point out the ads, or pointing to the results and saying, is this sponsored or is this organic? You obviously have to phrase it better than that. Basically, did someone pay to be here? Because you go back to early Google, first AdWords as they were called back then, they were very, very clearly labeled. I forget when the background was the first background yellow, pink, blue, can't remember, but it had a colored background, it had a prominent label. They were only in the one place on the search results. Over time, all of those things have changed. No background, no prominent label, more blending in, more looking like organic results, not just in one place. With the short-lived infinite scroll, they were even in the middle of the search results in ways that looked more like paid inclusion for those of us who've been around a while. But yeah, anyway, so this is from The Verge, this article I'm showing here, saying it's apparently pretty standard fact that Google shows ads on about 20% of queries. So if we if we drill even deeper into the data and say, if we just look at clicks to the web rather than all searches, we find that 93% of those go to organic. But actually, I think the number is closer to Rand's 85% going to organic, 15% or so going to paid, when you factor in the fact that for a given search session, folks can click on multiple things. So you can open things in multiple tabs, you can go back and forth, etc. And of course, the search session allows for the fact that you do future searches. And so when you take all of that into account, I need to drill into it slightly, but I think Rand has pulled this out from the raw data to say the answer isn't really the 7% paid, it's more like 15% paid. And as I mentioned, this is the source of $250 billion of Google's revenue in the orange bit. It's not only that all that spend comes from somewhere. Where does it come from? Well, it comes from advertisers. It is the brands and the websites' marketing budget. So, it's P&L, it's income for Google, it's spend for everyone else. That $250 billion is not matched by equivalent, never mind dominated by the spend on the green bit. And we've long talked about this in the SEO world. We've long, I guess, resented this. Why? Why does paid search get the lion's share of the budget when organic search is getting more of the clicks? Like we've known this forever, but I think this is a particularly good way of illustrating it that we haven't had recently and updated. And yeah, the point is that there is more opportunity to target the green bit. And the thing that's been bouncing around in my head since some of these conversations that I mentioned last week that I've been having at e-tail often with senior decision makers, so head of e-commerce, head of digital marketing, head of marketing, even heads of digital channels, those kinds of job titles, who are often not practitioners in any of the channels, but are managing the P&L. It's their job to hold them accountable, to set targets, to measure their performance. What I talked a lot last week about how they're setting those targets, how they're thinking about spend, how they think about these things as cost of sale, and so forth. The other thing that's really interesting that I've now heard twice from two different organizations is we really want to be better. We want our SEO team to be better at answering the question, what would you spend if we gave you more budget? What would you spend that budget on, and what would the results be? And I talked last time about the challenge of the second half of that question, the forecasting piece. So trying to figure out the benefit of doing certain things. But actually, the first half is just as interesting. So if you go to a paid media team and say, here's some more money, what would you do with it? They will typically have an answer to that question. They know what the next highest ROI activity they could play with is. Often these channels are managed by return on ad spend and similar kind of CPA type metrics rather than kind of spend budgets. But nonetheless, if you said, okay, we're going to relax our ROAS goal for this quarter because we want to drive more top line growth, or whatever it might be, they would know. They would have an answer. They would say, well, this channel's saturated, but there's opportunity over here. We could spend more here. We could increase these budgets. We could deploy our creative in these new places. We could open up these new channels that we haven't invested in up to this point, or that aren't typically high enough ROI for us. And SEO teams are way worse at answering this question. I get an agency, I produce more content. The level of thinking and the depth of strategic insight is not good enough. We need to be better at this, and I've definitely been on the wrong end of this conversation in the past, because we need to be able to answer it with confidence and with numbers to back it up, and then to be able to tie it to a plan, crucially. And I think it's that tying it to a plan that what joins the dots between the spend, the execution, the outcomes, and the results. All of those things are loosely coupled. There isn't a deterministic spending X on Y gives Z for my American friends, in any of these channels. And I had the little rant, I think probably last week or sometime, about the fact that forecasting is hard in any discipline. The whole point is there's uncertainty. The whole point is there's externalities and things that might happen to you that you didn't do. But we do it in finance. We do it in sales. We do it in marketing generally. But SEO has always been reluctant as a channel. I think it's fair to say. I think I've called it allergic at times to the idea that, well, we can't possibly forecast what would happen because it's out of our control. It depends what Google does, which is definitely shirking our responsibility, in my opinion. Those unknowables or unknowns or external factors happen in every single forecast, every kind of forecast, and they need to be taken into account. You need to say, here's what happened. And the point of the forecast is not to think this is what's happening with certainty. It's really to say, here's a story, here's a plan, here's how we're on track against this plan, here's how we're tracking, here's how we're trading, here's where we're off track, and here's what we need to do to get back on track. And it's that insight, introspection, and accountability that is the really critical piece. And I think I've talked about this at times before, but accountability is one of those key words in there. So I think people misuse the word accountability. When too many folks say accountability when they mean consequences. If you say, I just wish that our organization was better at holding folks accountable when they screw up, sometimes people mean they want them fired or they want them to not get their bonus or whatever. Those are consequences. Those are things that happen, bad things that happen as a result of bad things happening. But that's not really what accountability is. And I quite like the story. I think it does come from politics. And it's an interesting time on the day after the UK general election to think about Parliament in the UK, and that's where I believe it comes from. Is the idea of the uh, the way that accountability works from Parliament is that you can get called to testify essentially in front of a committee, and that is not like being in a courtroom in front of a jury, or the outcomes are not go to jail or be fined or lose your job, or at least they're not the immediate outcomes. Obviously, you can say things that can get you in trouble, but the point of those hearings is accountability, which what the word actually means is the obligation to give an account, to explain yourself, to say what's happening. And this is how a forecast works, in my opinion. Is it's not about if we don't hit that number, there are going to be consequences. It's about if we're not tracking to that number, I want an explanation. I want an account. I want somebody to be accountable. And the act of having to give that explanation, that is what accountability is. And done in the right way, in the right organization, with the right structure around it, that is very, very powerful. Anybody who's ever prepared for a major meeting, presented to a board, even just prepared a board pack, you have felt the power of accountability. You've felt what it means to be held accountable. And those can be some of the kind of scariest professional experiences that any of us go through. And the point here is to say, if we want, as the organic search channel, getting 85% of the opportunity of search as a whole, but a fraction of the budget, if we want to get more of that budget, we need to learn lessons from the orange bit, which is a smaller fraction of the opportunity, but the lion's share of the budget. And this brings me back all the way full circle to this positioning that I'm talking about, kind of increasingly, of how do we make organic search more accountable, which results in high performance and allows us to design a program into which you can put more budget and get greater results. And this is where I've talked before about the goals of an experimentation program. And increasingly at SearchPilot, we find ourselves selling the setup of an experimentation program, or the integration of SEO and organic search into an existing experimentation program, rather than just tests. Tactically, sure, it's about running however many tests this year, but organizationally, it's about saying, actually, we want to be running. Strategically, we're going to increase the cadence of this. We're going to run more tests a quarter. We're going to get more lessons learned. We're going to focus on our win rate, and we're going to therefore drive the results that we're hoping for. And I've been reviewing a couple of things from our teams at SearchPilot recently where we're running ahead of target, and it's great because we can look at all the way from the KPI of test velocity, number of tests run. We've got on track, and we're ahead of that goal because we're running more tests per quarter than the baseline that we targeted ourselves on. And obviously, it's not guaranteed to work. No channel is ever guaranteed, but that is the best mechanism I've found, where we can define a thing where we can put more effort in and get more results out on these scaled websites where, writing a blog post or, that's not going to move the needle for a major travel company or a major e-commerce company, major retailer, those kinds of things. What we need there is more lessons per day, more lessons per week, per month, per quarter. And so I've talked before about having those kind of paired KPI of number of tests per quarter and win rate. And we're trying to have win rate stay somewhat stable while ramping up test speed, which results in more lessons learned per quarter, and crucially, more wins. And so that's, I'm hoping that we're going to have more to talk about soon. We've got some great results that we're turning into customer stories, but where we're significantly ahead of target. We've got some great charts and great accountability stories to tell around that. But I feel like there's this opportunity to tie it back into a narrative that starts all the way back up here with this chart showing that all of paid search is that tiny orange bar, and when you take account of repeated searches, that 70% of all clicks on a search result are going to organic listings, and we need to take that seriously. If you're responsible for the P&L of a website that makes a ton of money online, right, which are those retail, e-commerce, travel, etc., then you need to be able to figure out where are you putting that next dollar, and why aren't you pitching for more, and how do we think more in cost per acquisition, return on ad spend type metrics that businesses fundamentally understand. So that's what I've been kind of noodling on. To tie it together, we actually also have some upcoming test hypotheses that I'm hoping that we'll get some great results from and be able to talk about, where we're actually tying together paid and organic data and running tests that span the paid and organic search channels. And that's really exciting. And there's some great stuff coming there. So watch this space. If you're interested in being the first to hear, if you head to searchpilot.com/live, there's signups for the email newsletter. There's signups for how the test case studies results as we publish them, as well as more background information on how our model works, how we work on things, and some of the results that we've had for customers. And you can follow me. I'm at Will Critchlow on Twitter and LinkedIn. DMs are open. You can ask me questions. Please do reply on LinkedIn or Twitter to these live streams, and I'm happy to follow up with more answers to more questions, or you might guide what future streams are about. And so I try to go out live every week on typically either a Tuesday or a Friday at this kind of time. So it's 4:15 p.m. in the UK when I started, which is 11:15 a.m. East Coast, 8:15 a.m. on the West Coast. And if you follow me in those places and sign up to the email newsletter, you'll get to hear when those things happen. So as we wrap up today, that's enough about paid search for now. The other things that have been on my mind, my podcast feed has been taken over by politics recently. I don't want to talk about that. But the other interesting bit of my week has been that I've been in a few strategy meetings where we've been talking about either finance and budgets, our own ones at SearchPilot, finance, budgets, marketing plans, and so forth. And the final thing I'm going to leave you with, something that's been frustrating the hell out of me since I knew about it before, but we were talking about it this week, is my COO at SearchPilot, Craig Bradford, brought up the questions from Jerry Colonna. And I don't know if you all know Jerry. He's the founder of Reboot, which is a coaching company. They run the I forget what he calls it, CEO retreat, CEO bootcamp, maybe it's called, which I actually haven't done, but my co-founder did back when he was CEO of Distilled. And I've read some of Jerry's books. I've met Jerry, and he's a fascinating guy, very talented at making people cry. And he likes to ask these 4 questions. And I'm going to leave these with you because the 4th one in particular is an absolute dagger if you really allow yourself to think about it. So the questions are, what am I saying that's not being heard? What's being said that I'm not hearing? What needs to be said that is not being said? And here's the dagger. How am I complicit in creating the conditions that I say I don't want? Ouch. Because I think we all do that. And it's kind of scary to really try and answer that question, because you know that the answer is going to be doing that slightly difficult or very difficult thing that stands between you and getting better results. So I'm going to leave you with that cheery thought on this lovely Friday. I hope the rest of your week goes well. do drop me a line with anything you're interested in and that you're enjoying on these things. It can feel a little bit like just talking to the void, but I'm having more and more calls where I get on the video call and people are like, oh, I recognize that background. I've seen that on LinkedIn, or I've seen that on Twitter, or I've seen that on YouTube. So somebody must be watching, which is nice to see. Yeah, I've enjoyed this little blast through thinking about how we can use lessons from paid search to be better at our jobs in organic search. So until next time, I'm Will Critchlow. It's been lovely chatting to you. Take care.